Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive. Today I have with me a very special guest, Steve from Ethereum Attestation Service. Welcome, Steve.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing good. Yeah, so I met Steve out. I came to your booth at Denver, which was a great time. Hopefully it was good for you guys too. But if you could kind of just tell me, how did you start EAS? How did, sort of you come onto this idea of doing it?
Yeah, sure. It kind of goes pretty far back, but I've been in the blockchain space since 2011. Actually, I built some of the first Bitcoin wallets in 2013, and I was also on the founding team of Ethereum. And during that time, it was I was super interested in like how you can decentralize more than just money. And it seemed like smart contracts were the way. And but 9 years later, like there's really hasn't been any kind of decentralized identity and reputation platforms and all the things that we were like really excited about back in 2014, that just like never really happened. And I think the reason it didn't happen is because it's not obvious how you go from a smart contract platform to solving these kinds of problems. Like if I want to be able to, you know, make a digital kind of claim that says that I met you uh, in real life, right? Like how could we like how do I do that? Do I have to like create an NFT? Do I have to hire like a team of devs to build an NFT specifically for saying that? And then like when someone sees the NFT, how do they know that there's an intention there that I said that I met you in real life? Is it because of the picture? Do I have to like read some IPFS values? It made no sense. And like no one was really, it seems like, no one has been really anything that I've seen around like identity and reputation in like the last few years, it's just been like basically glorified KYC companies, and they build their own kind of like siloed little protocol that's like not interoperable with anything else. And in order to get developers to use it, these companies that usually have VC funding, they have to onboard these companies, and the only way to their credentials or whatever actually work is if other entities use their protocol. And there's just so many different protocols, and none of them actually solve decentralized identity, which I thought was the most interesting thing, because uh, identity and reputation, it's a very kind of complex thing to solve and super important if you want to be able to do things like under collateralized loans, knowing who to trust in like from an address, knowing what contracts to trust, uh, deriving relative reputation, all this cool stuff that we're hoping for. You can't have it unless you solve this. And identity is super complex. It's both relative in the sense that you might trust me, but someone else might not trust me. And it's also contextual in the sense that you might trust me as a developer, but you might not trust me as a cook, right? So
Sure.
like there's so what in the sense, like say I want to prove to you my reputation to get a loan, the kinds of thing proofs that I give you could be like a really wide variety. Like maybe what kind of takes you over the edge is I show you like a proof that we went to the same college, and maybe that's what takes it off. And because identity makes up all these little kind of pieces, you can't just build an identity platform. That's where these companies fail. They try to build an identity platform as the base layer, but because they presuppose all these pieces about what identity and reputation are, they don't allow for all these like interesting kind of signals that are important in reputation. And so that's kind of why I started this. I was really interested, like, what actually is identity first off, because how do you really describe it? Went into a whole thing, like kind of philosophical thought of like, well, at some point I must have had no identity, and then I did have an identity. and then started to think, well, at what point was that? And then realizing, when I was born, you know, my mom named me Steve, and you can say that she attested to my name, right? And then I went to school, and the teachers, they attested to my grades. The kids in the class, they could have attested to whether they liked me or not. Government attested to my passport and my driver's license. University attested to your diploma. And an employer could attest to your employment. And so I realized actually you can represent identity as an aggregate of a bunch of attestations about yourself. And so realizing that we needed to start with like a base layer where any entity can attest about anything. And that's basically how it started.
Awesome. It's a great background. I have like a bajillion questions already. But I think actually the easier part than answering the questions is probably just explaining how it works, because it's really, really simple, right?
It's very simple. Yeah. So,
why don't you just like kind of walk me through it? Like 0x, if the way that it works, I think it's on every chain, or
it's ultimately going to be on every chain where there are, developers and users. Currently it's on mainnet and, all the popular L2s, and it's continuing to grow.
So
it's EVM based. And so there's two components to it. There's an on-chain a smart contract component to it.
Yep.
For on-chain attestations, and then there's actually an off-chain attestation protocol as well.
So like let's say I wanted to make the attestation, like what would be a good example? Like Steve is an American citizen, right? That could be
sure. Yeah, so sure.
This would be, so I'm guessing it would start at my ETH wallet. So like I'm the Mandalore.eth, and I would just post this data on chain, right?
Yeah. So there's on chain there are two main smart contracts related to EAS. One is called the schema registry, and it allows you to define different types of attestations. So like a schema, for example, you would have one schema for voting about something. You might have another schema for saying you met somebody, another schema for issuing, a diploma, and anyone can register a schema, and a schema can have any kind of like types inside of it. So it can have like, for example, say it has for example, this is an attestation of some, let's just give an example of someone receiving a diploma, and we'll just do it very like simply. Maybe there's like the recipient's name, right, which could be a string, perhaps the timestamp of when it was issued. Well, actually, so attestations already have a timestamp of when the attestation itself was issued, but maybe there's like the year of like so like you just know that this was actually meant to be for this year. Maybe the attestation could have been reissued at a later time for someone who had gotten a diploma back in the day. They can still put the year, and you can just define a schema however you want. You can have arrays of objects, and the schema is just the definition for what the attestations, for the types of attestations that you want to make. So let's assume that this is a schema for, issuing a diploma. You can now then use the EAS contract, which is just like the ledger of attestations, and you can call a test on it, passing in a recipient, or optionally no recipient, if this attestation doesn't have a particular subject.
That corresponds to the schema.
Yeah, and the data becomes encoded based on the schema that you so you actually reference the schema. So every schema gets its own unique identifier. Every time a schema is registered, it gets its own unique identifier.
Yep.
And when you make an attestation, you have to reference one of those schema unique identifiers.
Cool.
You can also there's other parameters as well. So there can be a recipient. You can also reference another attestation. So say, for example, I attested that I met you. You might want to attest that that's true, that attestation that I made is true, right? Rather than issuing a new attestation saying that you met me, maybe that would be like minutes apart or seconds apart or whatever. How do we know that we're talking about the same moment? Well, attesting to another attestation allows you to reference the previous attestation and create this kind of contextual chain. And you're able to compose attestations on top of each other. Then someone else, maybe there's some other witness who also attests and said that they saw it, happen. Attestations can optionally have an expiration time, so the attestation could expire. Maybe this is like some sort of like role that's assigned that's expirable. Maybe it's like a subscription. And attestations can also be revocable. So an attestation can be irrevocable as well, but in general, attestations are usually revocable, meaning the attester can revoke their attestation at a later time. Additionally, so EAS is pretty much that, but there's one additional thing, and that gives EAS a lot of power, and they're called resolvers. So a schema, besides having the actual the typed data, can also have an optional resolver contract attached to it. What happens when someone makes an attestation with a schema that has a resolver contract? That resolver contract gets called with the data of the attestation, with the attestation data. What the resolver contract can do is it can actually reject an attestation, right? So you might say, for this schema, we only want these particular users to be able to use it, or maybe only you can attest with this schema if you have another attestation. You can build up logic like this. You can make a payment happen upon an attestation. Maybe you're building an Oracle service, and like when the Oracle attests to some particular truth, they get paid out. You can build in whatever kind of logic you want with the resolver to really like extend EAS to whatever use case you want.
Wow. Yeah, super cool. So, like for digital identity, if you get enough people to attest to you, then it could issue you some NFT that represents your driver's license on chain or something.
Yeah, if you think the NFT is important. So the idea, one of the things with EAS, right, is we saw like that a lot of people were trying to do identity related stuff with NFTs, but because when you have an NFT, it's not really obvious like where it came from, who, like, if is it expired, has it been revoked? If it's revoked, does it just disappear from your wallet? How do you like know what the intent of the actual NFT is? NFTs can have like obviously like any kind of like can have any kind of interface, like completely different interfaces from each other. They can store data widely differently. There's no real like kind of standardization. It doesn't really operate as good as like kind of a credential. And so EAS is, and we also like to say like, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, or, an NFT, right? And so attestations like are a new primitive that are useful for describing any kind of intent, whether it's a supply chain movement, signing a document, a tweet, a meeting. There's infinite kinds of things that can describe. Attestations always have an attester, right, which can also be a smart contract, and they can expire, they can have revocability. All this is kind of built in, but the things that we presuppose about the attestation structure is very minimal and kind of what you would hope was there inside of an attestation, right?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes into the idea too, like, you have, I think Vitalik talks a lot like the soulbound tokens,
Yeah.
For identity, but that's sort of almost kind of like you were saying, it pushes all identity and all sort of verifiability to the person issuing these things.
Yeah, and because they can all have like different shapes, right? And different entities could issue their own SBTs that would probably be from completely different contracts. There's no real interoperability or understanding of what's going on. It's just more kind of siloed data. And like, especially in blockchain, you can't have like, 100 different, ways of doing things, 100 different APIs to like verify something. Imagine a smart contract having to put in all that logic. Whereas, if everyone starts using something standard like EAS, you kind of don't have that problem, and you have the, kind of infinite flexibility to design whatever kind of, attestations you really want.
Yeah, and then I guess, how does this work? Is this always just an EOA as far as like me, or
So
is this, like, is this transferable as well?
it can be a contract, right? It can be a contract that has an owner as well, if it needs to be. Uh, it can be a contract with no owner. It can be a contract with no owner that verifies something is true and then attests. Maybe like there's some zero knowledge proof, right, that you have. And rather than having to prove the zero knowledge proof every single time to some application, you can just prove it to some smart contract that verifies it, gives you an attestation that the zero knowledge proof is real, and then you don't have to keep verifying a zero knowledge proof every single time. It's much cheaper to verify that the attestation exists. So yeah, but the attester is always like some EVM address.
Okay, and then no, I mean, I guess like it's really cool because I mean, like in some ways, so like I usually do oracles, and we, in a lot of ways, like an oracle is attesting to a price, but most of the time, what you assume in some way is that the oracle is, say, slashable or whitelisted, right?
Yeah.
And you sort of take that away here. You almost remove kind of the aspect of almost like this person is a trusted party either because of collateral or because of whether they were whitelisted like a trusted oracle.
You could still have like a market where like the oracles don't get paid out unless they're within some sort of whitelisted group. But the thing is, the idea is that anybody can attest, and then other entities can value the attestations based on who's attesting. So like if Coinbase attests to someone being, a verified, Coinbase user, and it comes from Coinbase.eth, I'll probably trust that what they're saying is true. If some random address that I've never heard of, or even just someone I've heard of that I don't, trust as an authority, says something like that, I'm not gonna believe it. And so ultimately, like, if you want to have a truly decentralized reputation and trust, you have to be able to derive kind of your a relative reputation for any entity that you're dealing with. But attestations kind of allow you to do that by, like, so say I trust you and you trust someone else. The trust should be sort of transitive in the sense that that other entity should have some sort of value when I look at them in the connected graph.
Yeah, I mean, that's like, I would say this is almost more of an engine for like reputation than like identity, if you would. But it's
Well,
also, sorry.
your identity is like, your identity can be represented, your reputation for sure can be represented as attestation, but your identity is almost kind of your reputation as well, right? Like what, like, it's not just what you say about yourself and your personality and your whatever, but it's what people see you as, what people say about you, like, ultimately that make up your kind of identity and reputation.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I really liked this and want to talk to you was like most of the time when you think of reputation, like I always go back to like the old Augur token, like reputation. And reputation always has this, especially in crypto, it has this financial value to it.
Yeah.
Reputation is not anything except this financial value, this mindless thing. Whereas this, do you see this as like a different form of reputation, or do you see it just being as a building block for one of those tools?
Yeah, well, I mean, I haven't seen any real reputation systems built. What I see is like people's reputation are almost based on how many tokens they have, in like a DAO, for example. But imagine that you're able to value people based on the attestations they receive. Like like for example, Coinbase currently attests. They actually attest to Coinbase verified Coinbase users. They will attest if you are a Coinbase user and even like what country you live in, and other entities can ingest those attestations and verify and verify those attestations and like let them into some service in a way that you just you just really couldn't do before, like because the system allows entities with Ethereum addresses, ENS addresses, to kind of use like wallets that currently exist today to make these kinds of claims on chain, also off chain.
Cool. Well, do you want to show me how does the off-chain piece work?
Yeah. So I mean, I can also share my screen and show if that's helpful.
Yeah, I mean, if you want, I've never had somebody else share their screen.
So just quick, like this is the EAS Explorer, and it's like you can think of it as like Etherscan for attestations and schemas. So you can just see these are schemas that people have recently registered, and you can just see they're just like the data types here, and they all have like a unique identifier. And here you can see attestations coming in. And so you can see here, like here's like a common one that comes in. It's a attestation from Gitcoin Passport. So they actually use EAS to put their off-chain stamps on-chain in case smart contracts want to verify what your score is. But anyway, to off-chain attestations. So I'm gonna just pick a schema that's very simple. It's just string statement, so it's very kind of simple. And if you try to make an attestation, our Explorer will actually decode the schema and like allow you to make the attestation. And so I'm gonna, instead of on chain, I'm gonna do off chain, and I'm just gonna say like, happy to be doing this deep dive session. And I'm gonna actually, you know what? Hold on. Oh wait, yeah, whatever. I'm using some other address right now, not my main DAC.eth address. So
Cool.
the wrong accounts.
MetaMask just changed, like they just did an update yesterday, so it's like,
Did they? Hopefully it doesn't break anything. All right, let's try this again. Great having this deep dive session.
cool.
Okay, so off chain. So my wallet opens up here, and I'm asked to sign an EIP 712 signature. So I'm signing it, and then boom. So here's the off chain attestation. One thing to note is the off chain attestation didn't cost any money. The server doesn't even know about it. So it's currently actually just in my browser. If I close this window and I don't save this URL, this attestation is, for all intents and purposes, gone. There's multiple ways I can share this attestation. So one, I can download it as this kind of like raw data with the signature encoded inside of it. I could share it as a QR code, and if you actually scan this QR code, it actually has this entire data encoded and gzipped inside of it. And so actually, when you scan this, it loads up this URL, and this URL has the entire attestation, off-chain attestation, encoded inside of it in such a way that the server, it doesn't even get sent to the server. So when you load it, if you scan this QR code or load this link, it will load EAS scan and then decode from the URL in the browser and verify that the attestation indeed came from who it came from and that all the attestation data is valid. So it's, you can verify these off-chain attestations with our SDK. You can also verify them on-chain by smart contract if you need to. Also, off-chain attestations can be timestamped on-chain and even revoked on-chain. So it's great because many times when people are making attestations, they don't necessarily need to be read by a smart contract. Like if I test that I met you in real life, like it's unlikely that a smart contract will need to verify that, right? Someone else might want to verify that. Maybe some app might want to verify that. but usually not a smart contract. So for these cases, you can make off-chain attestations, which still use your wallet, still use your same key, still have the same structure as on-chain attestations, but they're completely gasless and can just be stored, passed around, on a need-to-know basis, or even published. So like we even have a tool here where we'll publish it to IPFS and even like publish it to our indexer, so anybody can access it from our Explorer or GraphQL endpoint.
Nice. Yeah, I guess for things that like you don't have to worry about double spends or anything like that, you could like do it all completely off chain.
Correct.
Nice.
Yes.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, it sort of reminds me a little bit of like kind of like the old DAG models from like IOTA, if you will. Like if you were gonna like do a trusted graph of weighting the nodes. I mean, do you have anybody, like, because like the obvious attack vector here would be like, like if you were trying to do this in a decentralized way and not just make it like a you trust one whitelisted party, you would want to like scrape a bunch of data identities, right? But then like it's not Sybil resistant in the sense that somebody could say spin up a whole bunch of things. But I guess the answer there is you wouldn't trust them, or
yeah. So the idea is, imagine if like so just imagine you start fresh. You start with a wallet, right? And then you just kind of set some initial weights. Maybe the wallets in the future, they'll have already some like initial weights. Like maybe they'll have some trust assigned to like Coinbase, some trust assigned to like Optimism, some trust assigned to governments, whatever. You would then set your own parameters, like you trust this guy, you trust this influencer, you put negative trust to some untrusted entities. And then if there's some bot that's just generating a bunch of identities and attesting to itself, you'll find that bot is not, and all of its connections, none of them are actually attached to you. Like your downstream transitive trust will never reach those nodes. They'll be kind of very disconnected, because the value of their attestations is their value, and their value is based on the attestations that they've received. And so if they receive no attestations from anyone valuable to you, then their score would be 0. And that's the importance of the relative trust, right? Rather than having like some like kind of global trust score where like your score is kind of static no matter from where you look. That actually doesn't make any sense, because one entity might rate someone really high, while someone else might rate them quite low. And so you need to have this kind of like relative way to derive trust. And so like we are working on really cool tools and ways to visualize and derive like trust scores, like down the line, like when you look at any entity in the network based on attestations. And also these kind of trust scores, they're not just like you don't just get one trust score, right? Like there's different categories, right? So you might be really good as an engineer, you might have a different kind of score as for public goods versus something else versus another category.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I guess the only attack vector, I guess, would be like if you make this some contract address where you then are selling your reputation or able to sell your reputation down the line, and then it's sort of
yeah. I mean, like, sure, there's always the chance that someone builds up a really good reputation and then burns it, right? For sure. The thing is, to build up such a good reputation, you had to have done really, really good for a long time, right? And maybe you can trust someone more if they have more other people that they trust vouching for this entity. And so you kind of get to decide for yourself. But the thing is, people can rug pull in real life, and they do. And so it's something that is going to be an issue, but I think there are like pretty good ways to reduce that risk.
right. All right. No, I mean, what am I missing about it? Before I ask you random ideas I had to use EAS, you can tell me if they're awful.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean the one I was just thinking about would be like for like validator centralization in Ethereum. Like if you had, let's say part of the problem, like with Lido is getting really, really big, and they could potentially centralize the whole thing. Like you could potentially say, like, you could make attestations that they're too big, or they're, what percentage of the validators that they control, and then basically
Yeah.
in protocol you could potentially change it to, like, maybe you like limit the actual attestation rewards they get on chain or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if that'll ever like affect the core consensus model. I think this I mean, unlikely. They would probably build, if they were going to do something like that, they'd probably build. I mean, yeah, I mean, things can change. Yeah, for sure, things can change in the future. Like as people really do build up real reputations that, where entities are trusted by a lot of people, maybe we'll probably have chains where it'll just be like full proof of authority chains, but just the authorities will be like people that we all really, really trust so much that we would never suspect that they would rug us. And it'll be super fast, like infinite transactions per second.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that I had that we're working on, so this is at Teller, so we're working on like a decentralized CPI. So, like, how could you do an inflation index based on EAS? And what I had was, like, so if you know how the actual inflation index in the government works, it's a survey. You just go, they literally have people that walk around in grocery stores and write down prices of different things.
Yeah, the basket of items. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you could potentially do the exact same thing here, to where you just have like an item ID, and then you report the price, and then it would just be, and then you would probably have you could have like different aggregators, like
Yeah.
you basically have outlier detection as a service.
Yeah. You can build a smart contract where you like say you do trust certain people, right? So you add like maybe Vitalik, you add Anthony Sassano and like other and like addresses that you trust, and you basically tell them that you basically put up a bounty and they just get paid. All they have to do is attest to the truth, and you trust that they're going to attest to the truth. You doubt that they're going to attest to something false, and then as soon as one of those addresses attests, they get paid out part of the bounty. So you can just set up these kind of rewards for trusted entities, and they can just kind of pick up these, rewards, and they'll be given them because of their value and their reputation in the ecosystem.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could even, the bigger question would be is, like, how do you sort of gain that reputation in the system? Like how do you get reputation in, say, let's say the CPI base? How do you make reputation? Do you just do it honestly for weeks and days?
Yeah, so
You have to go be on Twitter.
so imagine I can prove to you, like in a zero knowledge way, like that, I'm a US citizen, right? I'm not a terrorist. I have this degree, like, I've met, Vitalik trusts me, like just like if you can show a bunch of attestations that might be valuable to enough people and they think that it's true, and because these attestations are literally digital signatures from the people who are signing, um, you could, you know, base your trust models on that.
For sure. Yeah, no, I really like it. Yeah, so I guess can we go farm points or earn a governance token?
No, EAS is completely open source and free and no token. It's kind of like meant to be like open in the same way that email is, right? Like imagine if email had some sort of like a token or for-profit kind of business, like you might have like multiple kind of spawns like Fmail and Kmail or something, and every single country and would have a different kind of service, and that would make no sense. The whole idea is, we attest all the time. We sign documents, we say things about things. If we're all doing it in like 100 different languages, it's not really going to be useful. And so we got to start kind of using one language attestations.
Yeah, I mean, well, like some decentralized social medias too. Like I know, like like Lens and I don't know, Farcaster, do you sign with your key as well? Could those be viewed as attestations in any way?
Yeah, they totally can be. Even we made like a demo application where I'll actually just share it real quick because
Oh,
it's
cool.
pretty cool. So the idea was like, let's just see how you can build like a kind of uh, Twitter kind of app or social media app using attestations. So here, for example, so in this case, every single tweet, every single post is an attestation, every reply is an attestation, every like is an attestation, every follow is an attestation. And so just look at this one example here. We have Vasa.eth, he says GM, and then this guy Osprey.eth replies and says, GM, such a good video you put together. And so like if you want to actually see the underlying attestation here, we can click here and we can see this is actually an on-chain attestation from Vasa.eth with no recipient. And he used the schema post, which is just a string post. And he just said GM. And then if you look, there's two attestations referencing it. And you can see down here, one of them is a like from Osprey, and the other one is a post from Osprey. And so this is the same schema as this, actually. And so if you make a post attestation referencing another post attestation, that's a reply. And so this front end just kind of builds, the kind of ground truth, display off of these attestations.
You just need a really cheap chain for this to make sense. And then
Yeah, if you use a really cheap chain, like maybe like Arbitrum Nova or something like that, could be actually useful.
like Gnosis chain, I think that would be cool. They might be into that.
Yeah, Gnosis chain would be good too.
Super cool. Yeah, anything I missed, or where can people kind of find out more about you, I guess?
So our main website is attest.sh, and you can find all the links and all the docs. Our docs are pretty good. Our GitHub has a TypeScript SDK with like a lot of examples of how to make different types of attestations and verify them. We have a GraphQL endpoint like at every single chain that we're on, so it's like super easy to build. We have a really good boilerplate app called METIRL. Actually, also, if you go to metirl.org, you can use off-chain attestations to attest that you met someone in real life, and then the other person can confirm. And so you can have like these free kind of proofs of connection. We were doing that in ETH Denver. But we open source that app, so you can load it yourself. You can clone it and then just like kind of modify it to your heart's desire to make really simple apps on top of EAS with like everything pretty much already done for you. So those links are probably the best. Also, we have a Telegram group, and feel free to join that and ask any questions. We usually are pretty quick at responding to all kind of technical and non-technical requests.
Nice. And then I guess is this actually stored on chain, or is this just called data?
So the schema registry and EAS, like if it's on chain, it's stored on chain.
Or on chain. Cool. Have you guys thought about like Denkun went live today? You could just store it as blobs, right?
Yes, but like in this case, like the smart contracts need to be able to access the data. They need to be able to read it even like at a much later time. It needs to persist. Blobs are really great, for L2 kind of storage, and that doesn't need to be verified like immediately on chain, in the future. So yeah, I mean, it could be interesting. It could be interesting for some kind of use case. I haven't thought of one yet, but we'll definitely keep that in mind.
Yeah, no.
It'll definitely make attestations cheaper on the L2s by like an order of magnitude.
Well, that's what I was thinking. Like, you could use an Oracle to to basically, like, if you could post all your attestations on a really cheap chain, and then you could just prove via some Oracle that the attestations were made, like aggregate and prove, and then
What
pass
was
it to people.
maybe with CCIP, you probably could, you could just, make the logic like some crazy logic on the cheap chain and then just have it send a message over to the other chain if it's valid.
Yeah, something like that. Like, I think it would be cool. Where like a zero knowledge proof that like, of the blocks or something.
Yeah.
It'd be fun. But yeah, no, this was very exciting. Happy to say I learned a little bit here about attestation stuff.
Yeah. Hopefully it's useful.
Anyway, but thank you very much. And yeah, talk to you soon.
Thank you.